Get out, now! Sarah stood frozen in the rain as her wedding dress flew from the third-floor window, landing in a muddy puddle at her feet. Her tears mixed with raindrops as Mr. Patterson, her angry landlord, threw more of her things onto the street. "But I just got married last week," Sarah cried, watching her new dishes smash on the sidewalk. "Should have thought about that before you let that dirty homeless man use your bathroom." Mr. Patterson yelled so loudly that everyone on the street turned to stare. "I don't want your kind in my building." Sarah, still in her nurse's uniform after a long hospital shift, tried to save her soaking wet photo albums from the gutter. Only an hour ago, she had given a shivering old man a cup of hot soup and let him warm up in her apartment. Now she was homeless herself. Her phone rang. It was Michael, her new husband. "Honey," she sobbed, "we've lost everything." Across the street, the homeless man watched, his sad eyes meeting hers before he walked away into the storm. Sarah had no idea that in exactly 30 minutes, this man would return and change her life forever. 3 hours earlier, Sarah hurried through the pouring rain, her worn-out sneakers splashing through puddles. Her hospital badge bounced against her chest as she ran. It had been a brutal 12-hour shift in the emergency room, 2 car crashes, a child with pneumonia, and an elderly patient who wouldn't let go of her hand until his family arrived. "Almost home," she whispered to herself, dreaming of a hot shower and the leftover wedding cake still in her fridge. Being married for only 8 days meant everything still felt magical. Even their tiny one-bedroom apartment that she and Michael had decorated with secondhand furniture and dollar store finds. As Sarah turned into the alley behind her apartment building, a shortcut she always took, she heard coughing, harsh, painful coughing that made her nurse instincts kick in immediately. "Hello?" she called out, squinting through the rain. There, huddled against the dumpster, sat an older man. His clothes were soaked through, his gray beard matted against his face. He looked up at Sarah with eyes so tired they made her heart ache. "Sir, are you okay?" Sarah moved closer, her medical training taking over. "Just waiting out the storm," the man said, his voice surprisingly gentle despite his rough appearance. "Don't worry about me, miss." But Sarah noticed his violent shivering and blue-tinged lips. Hypothermia was setting in. She'd seen it too many times in the ER. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "I live upstairs and I'm a nurse. You need to get warm and dry." The man hesitated. "Robert," he finally said, "but I can't impose." "You're not imposing if I'm inviting you," Sarah said firmly. "My husband won't be home for another hour. Just enough time to get you warmed up and maybe have some soup." Robert struggled to his feet, and Sarah noticed he limped slightly. Helping steady him, she guided him to the back entrance of the building. "Mrs. Finch might see us," Robert whispered, nodding toward apartment 1A, known for the nosy widow who spent her days watching everyone's comings and goings. "Don't worry about Mrs. Finch," Sarah smiled. "She needs new glasses anyway." Unfortunately, Mrs. Finch didn't need new glasses badly enough. As Sarah helped Robert up the stairs, she heard the old woman's door crack open. In apartment 3B, Sarah quickly found a clean towel and her husband's sweatpants and t-shirt. "The bathroom's small, but the hot water works great," she told Robert. "I'll make some soup while you get cleaned up." While Robert showered, Sarah heated homemade chicken soup, a wedding gift from her coworker. She texted Michael, "Helping someone in need. Tell you later. Love you." When Robert emerged from the bathroom, he looked like a different person. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair combed back. Without the dirt and rain, Sarah could see the kindness in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, accepting the steaming bowl. "Not many would help a stranger these days." "My mom always said kindness cost nothing," Sarah replied, sitting across from him. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Robert carefully sipped his soup before answering. "Life has a way of surprising you. 6 months ago, I had a whole different existence." Before he could continue, angry pounding rattled the apartment door. "Sarah Miller, open this door immediately." Sarah recognized the voice of Mr. Patterson, their landlord. Her stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Robert. "That's my landlord. He must have..." That old bat in 1A, Robert nodded, understanding immediately. She reported us. The pounding grew louder. I know you have an unauthorized guest. Open up now. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door to find Mr. Patterson's face twisted with rage. Behind him stood Mrs. Finch, arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on her face. Mr. Patterson, this is just a temporary. Your lease clearly states no unauthorized guests, he shouted, pushing past her into the apartment. When he spotted Robert, his disgust was immediate. A homeless bum? In my building? He was caught in the rain and needed help, Sarah tried to explain. It's just for an hour. This is a respectable building, Mr. Patterson spat. Not a homeless shelter. Robert stood up calmly. I'll go. Thank you for your kindness, Sarah. See what happens when you help their kind? Mrs. Finch hissed. They think they're entitled to everything. Mr. Patterson pointed at Sarah. You have 30 minutes to pack your things. You're evicted. You can't do that, Sarah protested. We have a lease. My husband and I just got married. Read section 8.3, he sneered. I can evict for unauthorized guests that pose a safety risk. And this, he gestured at Robert, is definitely a risk. As Robert slipped out the door with a look of apology, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. On my way home. Everything okay? She stared at her phone, then at Mr. Patterson's cruel face. In just 30 minutes, her perfect new life had completely fallen apart. You have no right to do this. Sarah's voice echoed through the hallway as Mr. Patterson supervised two maintenance men hauling her couch toward the stairs. I have every right, he shouted back, waving her lease in her face. It says right here, no unauthorized visitors that pose a safety risk. Sarah grabbed the other end of her couch. He wasn't a safety risk. He was just a man who needed help. By now, doors had opened throughout the building. Neighbors peeked out, some filming with their phones, others whispering behind their hands. No one stepped forward to help. Let go of the couch, Nurse Do-Gooder, Mr. Patterson sneered. Unless you want me to call the police for interfering with a legal eviction. Sarah's hands trembled, but she held firm. This isn't legal. We need proper notice. Not when safety is concerned, Mr. Patterson cut her off. That bum could have robbed everyone in this building. His name is Robert, Sarah said through gritted teeth, and he's a human being. Mrs. Finch emerged from her apartment, arms crossed over her flowered housecoat. I've lived here 30 years and never seen such shameful behavior. Bringing street people into our home. The maintenance men looked uncomfortable but continued carrying out Sarah's belongings. Her medical textbooks tumbled down the stairs, pages bending. The ceramic lamp her mother had given her as a wedding present shattered on the landing. Sarah's phone rang again. Michael. Sarah, what's happening? I'm 5 minutes away. Michael, she choked back tears. Mr. Patterson is evicting us. He's throwing all our things out right now. What? He can't do that. He is. Please hurry. Outside, the rain had intensified. Sarah watched in horror as Mr. Patterson directed the maintenance men to dump everything on the sidewalk. Her wedding dress, carefully preserved in plastic, landed in a puddle. Their small TV hit the concrete with a sickening crack. Please, Sarah begged, at least let me pack properly. Should have thought about that before you brought in trash from the street, Mr. Patterson replied coldly. A small crowd had gathered outside. Some neighbors looked sympathetic. Others seemed entertained by the drama. Sarah noticed Robert watching from across the street, his face filled with guilt. When their eyes met, he quickly turned away. Michael's car screeched to a halt at the curb. What the hell is going on? He shouted, running through the rain to Sarah. Michael was still in his work clothes, a button-up shirt and tie from the accounting firm where he'd recently been promoted. The promotion that had finally given them enough money to get married after 3 years of saving. This must be the husband, Mr. Patterson said mockingly. Your wife broke the lease, buddy. You're out. We've never been late on rent. Not once, Michael argued, his arm around Sarah's shaking shoulders. Doesn't matter. She brought a homeless vagrant into the building. Section 8.3 of your lease. He was sick, in the rain, Sarah cried. What was I supposed to do? Let him die? Not my problem, Mr. Patterson shrugged. Not yours either. Michael stepped forward, fists clenched. You can't just throw us out with no warning. Already did, Mr. Patterson smirked, holding up his phone. And I've called the police to make sure you leave the premises. Trespassing after eviction is a crime. Sarah tugged Michael's arm. It's not worth it. Let's just get our things before everything is ruined. Together they began gathering what they could. Their wedding album had fallen open, rain smearing the photos. The handmade quilt from Michael's grandmother was soaking up dirty puddle water. 8 days, Michael muttered as he loaded boxes into their small car. We've been married 8 days and now we're homeless. Neighbors with consciences finally emerged to help, passing boxes in a line to the car. Mrs. Chen from 2C whispered, This isn't right. I'm so sorry. Mr. Garcia from 4A slipped Sarah his phone number. My cousin is a lawyer. Call him. But most just watched. Some took videos. As the last of their belongings were crammed into the car, Mr. Patterson stood in the doorway, arms crossed in triumph. You have until tomorrow to get anything else, he announced. After that, it goes to the dump where it belongs. Sarah looked up at the apartment that had been their first home together, the string lights they'd hung on the balcony, the window box where she'd planted herbs, all the dreams they'd built there. Where do we go now? She whispered to Michael. He pulled her close, rain soaking them both. My friend Tom might let us crash on his couch, just for tonight. From across the street, Robert watched the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. As Sarah and Michael got into their overpacked car, he pulled out a phone surprisingly new and expensive and made a quick call. It's me, he said quietly. I found her, exactly like you said. Get the team ready. As Sarah and Michael drove away, homeless and heartbroken, neither noticed Robert checking his expensive watch. A plan was already in motion that would change everything in exactly 25 minutes. You can stay as long as you need, Jenny said, clearing toys from her tiny living room sofa. It pulls out into a bed. Not comfortable, but better than nothing. Sarah and Michael stood awkwardly in the doorway of their co-worker's apartment, dripping rainwater onto the welcome mat. Their car remained double-parked outside, stuffed with everything they could salvage. We can't thank you enough, Michael said, his voice hollow. The proud accounting junior manager who had just received his first promotion now looked defeated, holding a garbage bag of wet clothes. Jenny's 2 young children peeked curiously from behind the kitchen counter. Are they having a sleepover, Mommy? The little boy asked. Yes, sweetie. Now go brush your teeth, Jenny turned to Sarah. The bathroom's down the hall. I've put out clean towels. Sarah hadn't spoken since they arrived. In just 1 hour, she'd gone from being a respected nurse to homeless, all because she'd shown kindness to a stranger. I should call the hospital, she finally whispered. Tell them what happened. Already spreading around the break room, Jenny admitted reluctantly. Mrs. Finch's daughter works in billing. She's been texting everyone. Sarah closed her eyes. Great. While Michael brought in essentials from the car, Sarah sat on the edge of Jenny's bathtub, staring at her soaked sneakers. On the bathroom counter sat a bottle of champagne with a ribbon of gift from Jenny for their wedding just days ago. The wedding. Sarah's mind drifted to last Saturday. It wasn't fancy, just the courthouse followed by dinner at their favorite restaurant with 30 friends and family. Sarah had worn a simple white dress bought on sale. Michael had splurged on a new tie. They'd been saving for 3 years for that day. We'll get a house someday, Michael had promised during their first dance in her parents' backyard. With a garden for your herbs and a real office for me. Now here they were, homeless at 28, with student loans still looming and their possessions soaking in garbage bags. Sarah's phone buzzed with texts from hospital colleagues. OMG, heard what happened. You okay? Can't believe you got evicted. Why would you risk your apartment for a homeless guy? The last one stung. Sarah had always followed her heart when helping others. Last winter, she'd given her coat to an elderly patient who had none. She regularly brought extra sandwiches for the homeless people near the hospital. Just last month, she'd spent her lunch break helping a lost child find his mother in the park. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Michael leaned against the doorframe, his work shirt rumpled and stained. Tom says we can stay at his place tomorrow. His roommate's out of town, he said quietly. We can't keep bouncing between friends, Michael. I know. I called my parents. They said we could move in with them. Sarah looked up sharply. In Ohio? What about our jobs? We'd have to find new one, he admitted. Dad said he could get me something at his company. Starting over because I helped someone. Sarah's voice cracked. Michael sat beside her, the small bathtub creaking under their combined weight. Hey, you did the right thing. Patterson is the villain here, not you. Doesn't feel like it. Everyone's talking like I invited a criminal in. Michael took her hand. Remember why I fell in love with you? That big heart of yours, never apologize for that. From the other room, they heard Jenny's phone ring. Sarah, Jenny called moments later. It's Dr. Williams from the hospital. Sarah dried her tears and took the phone. Hello? Sarah, I heard what happened, the head nurse's stern voice came through. Mrs. Finch's daughter is telling everyone you harbored a dangerous vagrant. He wasn't dangerous. He was just cold and... I'm not asking for explanations, Dr. Williams interrupted. But I need to know, will this affect your shift tomorrow? Sarah hadn't even thought about work. I'll be there. Good, and Sarah? Next time, maybe call a shelter instead of risking your home. The call ended. Sarah handed the phone back to Jenny, who looked sympathetic. They're all talking about it in the break room group chat, Jenny admitted. Calling you reckless. I defended you, but... It's okay, Sarah said, though it wasn't. Later, as they tried to get comfortable on the pull-out couch, Michael whispered, What would you have done differently if you could go back? Sarah thought about Robert's grateful eyes as she handed him soup, his polite thank you for the clean clothes, the dignity with which he'd walked out when confronted. Nothing, she answered truthfully. I'd do it exactly the same. Outside, through the thin curtains, car headlights briefly illuminated their small sanctuary. Neither noticed the black SUV parked across the street or the well-dressed man inside speaking urgently into a phone. I've located them, Robert said, no longer resembling a homeless man at all. Yes, sir. Operation Kindness Repaid is ready to proceed. The clock on his luxury watch read 8:30 p.m. In exactly 15 minutes, Sarah and Michael's world would change forever. A sharp knock at the door made everyone jump. Jenny glanced at the clock, 8:45 p.m. Are you expecting someone? Sarah whispered, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. After everything that had happened, her nerves were shot. No, Jenny replied, peering through the peephole. She gasped. There are men in suits out there. Michael stood up. Maybe Patterson sent someone to harass us more? Jenny opened the door just a crack. Security chain in place. Can I help you? A deep, confident voice answered. Good evening. I'm looking for Sarah and Michael Miller. Sarah's stomach dropped. How did these people know where to find them? Jenny turned to them with wide eyes. Sarah nodded reluctantly, and Jenny removed the chain. The door swung open to reveal 3 men in perfectly tailored black suits, but it was the man in the center that made Sarah's mouth fall open. Robert, she whispered. The homeless man she had helped stood before her, but completely transformed. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair styled professionally. He wore an expensive charcoal suit with a blue tie that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. A gold watch glinted on his wrist, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Hello, Sarah, he said with a warm smile. I believe I owe you an explanation. Michael stepped protectively in front of his wife. Who are you, really? Robert gestured to the men beside him. This is my security team. May I come in? I promise I mean no harm. Jenny's children watched wide-eyed from the hallway as the elegant strangers entered their small apartment. Please sit, Robert said, acting more like the host than the guest. Sarah remained standing, her nurse's instincts on high alert. You weren't really homeless. No, Robert admitted. And yet I was exactly who I appeared to be, a person in need of kindness. One of the security men handed Robert a leather portfolio. He opened it and removed several documents. My name is Robert Westfield. I'm the CEO of Westfield Housing Foundation. He handed Sarah a business card with a gold embossed logo. We build affordable housing across the country. Michael examined the card skeptically. Why were you pretending to be homeless outside our apartment? Robert's expression turned serious. For the past year, I've been conducting what I call the Kindness Project. I spend 1 week each month living as a homeless person in different cities. But why? Sarah asked, still stunned. To understand the true nature of our housing crisis. To see firsthand how people treat those they think have nothing to offer. Robert's eyes met Sarah's. In 6 months, you're the only person who invited me inside without hesitation. Jenny's youngest child piped up from the hallway. Like when Jesus was disguised as a poor person in Sunday school stories? Robert smiled. Something like that, young man. So this was all some kind of test? Michael asked, anger rising in his voice. Do you realize what happened because of your project? We lost our home. I'm deeply sorry for that, Robert said, genuine regret in his voice. I never intended for anyone to suffer. That's why I'm here. He pulled out another document from his portfolio and handed it to Sarah. It was a deed. What's this? She asked, examining the paper. The address of your new home, Robert said simply. Fully furnished and paid for. The room fell silent. Sarah read the address. It was in Highland Park, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. This is a joke, Michael said. It has to be. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a key attached to a silver keychain. No joke, Michael. This is yours. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. We can't accept this. It's too much. Consider it compensation for the injustice you suffered, Robert replied, and perhaps a thank you for restoring my faith in humanity. He nodded to one of his security men, who opened a laptop showing security footage. We recorded everything Mr. Patterson did tonight. His emergency eviction was completely illegal. My lawyers are already preparing a lawsuit against him and the property management company. Michael sat down hard on the pull-out couch. I don't understand. When I started the Kindness Project, I promised myself that anyone who showed exceptional compassion would be rewarded. Robert looked at Sarah with genuine admiration. You didn't just offer me shelter, Sarah. You treated me with dignity when you thought I had nothing to offer in return. Jenny stood in the corner, recording everything on her phone. No one at the hospital will believe this. Sarah touched the key in disbelief. This can't be real. Robert checked his watch, the same one Sarah had noticed when he was homeless, though she hadn't realized its value then. My driver's waiting outside. I'd be happy to take you to see your new home right now. He smiled. Unless you prefer this pull-out couch. Outside the window, a sleek black limousine waited by the curb. Come, Robert said, extending his hand. Your life changed for the worse 30 minutes ago because of kindness. Now let it change for the better for the same reason. Sarah and Michael looked at each other, their worlds spinning in disbelief. 30 minutes ago, they were homeless. Now a mansion key sat in Sarah's trembling hand. The limousine glided through the rainy streets, its wipers sweeping away water in perfect rhythm. Sarah and Michael sat stiffly on butter-soft leather seats, still in their damp clothes from the eviction. Would you like something to drink? Robert asked, opening a hidden compartment, revealing a mini-fridge. Water? Juice? Answers would be better, Michael said, his arm protectively around Sarah. No offense, but this doesn't happen in real life. Robert nodded. Fair enough. He leaned forward. As I said, I'm Robert Westfield. My company builds affordable housing across America. We've created homes for over 50,000 families. I've never heard of you, Sarah admitted. I prefer to stay out of the spotlight, Robert replied. But you can Google me if you'd like. Michael already had his phone out. His eyes widened as he scrolled. He's legit, Sarah. There are articles about him in Forbes, Business Insider. Net worth estimated at $3.8 billion, Robert said with a small smile. Though those estimates are always wrong. Sarah stared out the window as they turned into Highland Park, the city's wealthiest neighborhood. Massive houses sat behind iron gates, their driveways filled with luxury cars. You still haven't explained why you were pretending to be homeless, Sarah said. Robert's face grew serious. 5 years ago, my sister Amy became homeless after losing her job. She had a mental health crisis, refused help, and lived on the streets for 8 months. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "When we finally found her, she told me stories about how people treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like trash." Robert's voice tightened. "But she also told me about the rare acts of kindness that kept her going. One nurse who always saved sandwiches for her." Sarah thought about the sandwiches she regularly brought to the homeless people near the hospital. "After we got Amy the help she needed, I made a decision," Robert continued. "I would experience homelessness myself, and then use what I learned to make real change." The limousine turned into a long driveway leading to an enormous stone mansion. Lights illuminated manicured gardens and a fountain in the circular drive. "Once a month, I spend a week living on the streets in different cities. No credit cards, no phone, no safety net. Just me, looking like any other homeless person." Robert looked directly at Sarah. "I've been ignored, spit on, arrested, and worse. But occasionally I find someone with true compassion." The car stopped. Through the window, Sarah and Michael could see a 3-story mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie. "This is your house?" Michael asked in disbelief. "One of them," Robert replied casually. "I rarely use this one. It mostly sits empty." The driver opened their door. As they stepped out, Sarah felt dizzy looking up at the enormous home. "I still don't understand why you're doing this for us," she said. "Come inside and I'll explain everything." They followed Robert through massive double doors into an entryway with soaring ceilings and a crystal chandelier. The foyer alone was bigger than their entire apartment had been. "When I find someone with genuine kindness, someone who helps with no expectation of reward, I make sure they're taken care of," Robert explained, leading them through rooms filled with expensive furniture and art. "But giving us a mansion?" Michael shook his head. "This is crazy." "The house is yours to use, not to keep," Robert clarified. "Consider it a temporary solution while my legal team handles your lawsuit against Patterson. The settlement should be substantial." Sarah ran her finger along a marble countertop in the kitchen. "This kitchen is bigger than our whole apartment was. 8 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a home theater, pool and tennis court," Robert listed. "The fridge is fully stocked. Clothes in your sizes are in the master bedroom closet." Michael looked suspicious. "What's the catch? Nobody does this for strangers." Robert sat down at the kitchen island. "The catch? Maybe I need to believe good people can win sometimes. Maybe I'm tired of watching the Mr. Pattersons of the world crush people with compassion. Or maybe you're crazy," Michael muttered. Robert laughed. "My board of directors often says the same thing." Sarah touched the kitchen sink's gold faucet. "We can't accept this. It's too much." "Tomorrow you can decide," Robert said gently. "Tonight, just get some rest. You've had a terrible day." He pulled out a business card and placed it on the counter. "My private number. Call me with any questions. The security team will remain outside. You're completely safe here." As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, "Wait!" She approached Robert, studying his face. "The homeless man I helped, was that really you? Or was it an act?" Robert's eyes softened. The dirt and smell were fake. The hunger and cold were real. The gratitude was absolutely genuine. He held her gaze. "When you handed me that bowl of soup, I saw my sister Amy and every homeless person who's ever been shown a small kindness." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah and Michael standing in the foyer of a mansion, still wearing their damp clothes, trying to process how their lives had changed so completely in just 1 hour. "I can't sleep," Sarah whispered, staring up at the ceiling of the master bedroom. The king-sized bed felt like a cloud after Jenny's pull-out couch, but her mind wouldn't quiet down. "Me neither," Michael replied, turning to face her. "This bed probably cost more than my car." Morning light filtered through massive windows overlooking a garden with a stone fountain. Last night, they'd been too shocked to fully explore the mansion. Now in daylight, the reality of their situation was sinking in. "Should we even be here?" Sarah sat up, hugging her knees. "This feels like a dream, or maybe a trap." Michael reached for his phone on the nightstand, a piece of furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. "I've been researching Robert Westfield all night," he said. "He's real. Started with nothing, built a construction company, then created the Westfield Housing Foundation 20 years ago. They've built affordable homes in 47 states. But why help us like this? Nobody gives strangers a mansion. Before Michael could answer, a soft knock came at the bedroom door. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, a woman's voice called. Breakfast is ready whenever you are. They exchanged startled looks. There's someone in the house, Michael whispered. Wrapping themselves in plush robes they'd found in the bathroom, they cautiously opened the door to find a middle-aged woman in simple professional attire. Good morning. I'm Gloria, the house manager, she said cheerfully. Mr. Westfield asked me to make sure you have everything you need. House manager, Sarah repeated. I manage all of Mr. Westfield's properties when he's not using them, Gloria explained. I prepared breakfast in the kitchen, and I've brought some proper clothes for you both. She gestured to several shopping bags by the door. We can't accept, Sarah began. Mr. Westfield was quite clear, Gloria interrupted gently. Everything is taken care of. The kitchen is downstairs to the left. After she left, Michael peeked into the shopping bags. Designer jeans, shirts with tags still on them. He pulled out a summer dress. This is your size. How does he know our sizes? Sarah asked. Do we really want to know? 30 minutes later, dressed in new clothes that fit perfectly, they made their way to the kitchen where an incredible breakfast waited. Fresh fruit, pancakes, eggs, and coffee. As they ate, Gloria brought in an iPad. Mr. Westfield asked me to show you this. It was a news article from that morning. Landlord under investigation for illegal eviction practices. There was a photo of their old apartment building and quotes from several former tenants describing similar experiences. Patterson has been doing this for years, Gloria explained. Intimidating tenants, illegal evictions, keeping security deposits. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. Robert's lawyers did this overnight? Mr. Westfield doesn't waste time when he sees injustice, Gloria said with a small smile. After breakfast, they explored the mansion. Each room was more spectacular than the last. A home theater with reclining leather seats, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, an indoor pool, and a game room with a pool table and pinball machines. I feel like we broke into a museum, Michael whispered as they stepped onto a massive back patio overlooking gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Or we're in a movie where the poor couple gets to live rich for a day before something terrible happens, Sarah replied. A familiar voice came from behind them. I assure you, nothing terrible is going to happen. They turned to find Robert approaching across the patio, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, still looking nothing like the homeless man Sarah had helped. How did you sleep? He asked, joining them at the stone railing. Like we'd been drugged, Michael admitted. Best bed I've ever been in. Good, Robert smiled. Gloria taking good care of you. Too good, Sarah said quietly. Mr. Westfield? Robert, please. Robert, we can't accept all this. The clothes, this house. It's too much. Robert studied the gardens thoughtfully. When I started my company, I was broke. I slept in my car for 6 months. One night, during a terrible storm, a family let me sleep on their couch. They had almost nothing themselves, but they shared what they had. He turned to face them. That family changed my life with their kindness. I promised myself that if I ever succeeded, I would pay it forward. But we're strangers, Michael pointed out. No, you're not. Sarah is the nurse who sees homeless people as human. You're the husband who supports her compassion even when it costs you everything. Robert's eyes were intense. Do you know how rare that is? Sarah felt tears forming. We just did what was right. Exactly. Robert placed a hand on her shoulder. That's why you deserve this. Not as charity, as justice. Michael stared out at the garden. So what happens now? Now, Robert said, you stay here as long as you need. My team is building a legal case against Patterson that will change housing laws in this city. And you, he looked at Sarah, get to go to work with your head held high, knowing you did the right thing and weren't punished for it. For the first time since the eviction, Sarah smiled. Maybe fairy tales sometimes came true after all. 3 days had passed since Sarah and Michael moved into the mansion. Though they still felt out of place among the luxury, They were beginning to adjust to their new reality. Sarah had returned to work at the hospital, where the story of her eviction and mysterious rescue had spread like wildfire. Co-workers who had judged her now looked at her with a mix of curiosity and respect. The homeless guy was actually a billionaire? Jenny had asked during lunch break. Like in a movie? It's complicated, was all Sarah would say. Now, sitting in Robert's home office with Michael beside her, Sarah watched as Robert spread several folders across his mahogany desk. I promise to explain everything, Robert said, opening the first folder. This is what my team has discovered about Mr. Patterson in just 3 days. The folder contained photographs, financial records, and legal documents. Sarah picked up a photo of their old apartment building. Patterson owns 17 buildings in the city, Robert explained, all purchased at low prices during the housing crisis 10 years ago. Michael examined a spreadsheet. These maintenance costs seem really low for buildings that size. Because he doesn't do maintenance, Robert replied grimly. Look at this. He opened his laptop to show them video footage of several apartments with shocking conditions. Black mold covering bathroom ceilings, exposed wiring, broken heaters in winter. He collects rent but ignores repair requests, Robert continued. When tenants complain, he finds reasons to evict them, just like he did to you. Sarah's stomach turned as she recognized one of the apartments. Wait, that's Mrs. Johnson's place. She's my patient. Robert nodded. That's how we connected the dots. 6 of your elderly patients at the hospital live in Patterson's buildings. Mrs. Johnson has chronic respiratory problems, Sarah said, her voice rising. I thought it was just age-related, but it could be from the mold. Exactly. Robert handed her another folder. Patterson has been sued 11 times by tenants. He always settles out of court with non-disclosure agreements. Michael shook his head in disgust. So he pays them off to stay quiet, then keeps doing the same thing to new tenants? It's cheaper for him than actually fixing the properties, Robert confirmed. My legal team estimates he saved over $2 million by ignoring safety regulations. Sarah thought about all the patients she'd treated from that neighborhood. The mysterious respiratory issues. Unexplained rashes, children with asthma attacks. How is this legal? She whispered. It's not, Robert said firmly. But people without resources can't fight back easily. A single mother working 2 jobs doesn't have time or money for a lengthy legal battle. He pulled out another document, a police report. Last winter, an elderly man froze to death in one of Patterson's buildings when the heating system failed. Patterson claimed it was the tenant's fault for not reporting the problem, but we found 6 maintenance requests that were ignored. Sarah covered her mouth. That's horrible. Robert's face hardened. That man was my former driver's father. James worked for me for 15 years before retiring. When his father died, I promised to look into it. So that's the real reason you were at our building? Michael asked. Investigating Patterson? Partly, Robert admitted. I was gathering evidence about all his properties. Your building was next on my list. I didn't expect to get evicted myself or to witness your kindness firsthand. A knock at the door interrupted them. A professional-looking woman entered, carrying more files. Mr. Westfield, we have the testimonies from 15 more former tenants, she said, and the city inspector's reports you requested. Thank you, Karen. Robert introduced her to Sarah and Michael. This is Karen Chang, head of my legal team. She's building the case against Patterson. Karen smiled at them. Your eviction was actually a blessing in disguise. It gave us clear video evidence of his illegal practices. How so? Michael asked. Patterson failed to file proper eviction papers, didn't give required notice, and disposed of your property illegally, Karen explained. Plus, his stated reason for eviction helping a homeless person isn't legally valid. What happens now? Sarah asked. Robert and Karen exchanged looks. That depends partly on you, Robert said. We're preparing a class action lawsuit against Patterson. Your testimony would be crucial. You want us to testify? Michael looked nervous. Only if you're comfortable with it, Karen assured them. Your story is compelling. A nurse helping someone in need, then being punished for it. Sarah thought about Mrs. Johnson and her other patients suffering in Patterson's buildings. I'll do it. Michael took her hand. We both will. Robert smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. He pulled out one final document. This morning, my foundation made an offer to buy all of Patterson's buildings. Sarah's eyes widened. All 17? He doesn't know it's us yet, Robert said with a slight smile. We used a shell company. Once we own the buildings, we'll renovate them completely and keep rents affordable. Can you do that? Michael asked. Won't you lose money? Robert's expression softened. Not everything is about profit, Michael. Sometimes it's about making things right. For the first time since meeting Robert, Sarah felt she was beginning to understand the man behind the billions and why he had chosen to help them. I can't sleep in this palace anymore, Michael whispered as they lay in bed that night. It doesn't feel right. A week had passed since they moved into the mansion. Though grateful, Michael had grown increasingly quiet, spending hours staring out windows or walking the massive grounds alone. What are you saying? Sarah propped herself up on one elbow. You want to leave? Don't you feel strange about all this? Michael gestured at their surroundings. Living in a billionaire's mansion while wearing clothes he bought us? Eating food we didn't pay for? Sarah sighed. Of course I do, but what choice do we have right now? We could stay with my parents in Ohio like they offered, find new jobs. Sarah sat up fully, switching on the bedside lamp. Run away, you mean? Let Patterson win? It's not running away, Michael argued. It's standing on our own 2 feet. The next morning, they found Robert in the garden, inspecting roses with Gloria. When he saw their serious expressions, he invited them to join him for coffee on the patio. You're troubled, Robert observed, studying their faces. Is everything all right? Michael looked down at his coffee cup fine china that probably cost more than his best suit. We appreciate everything you've done, but you're uncomfortable accepting so much help from a stranger, Robert finished for him. Yes, Sarah admitted, and Michael's parents have offered to let us stay with them in Ohio. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Pride is a complicated thing. When I was young and struggling, it nearly destroyed me. It's not just pride, Michael said defensively. It's about independence, standing on our own. I understand, Robert replied. More than you know. He took a sip of coffee before continuing. What if I offered you a different arrangement? What kind of arrangement? Sarah asked. A job, both of you. Michael's eyes narrowed. We don't need charity positions. Not charity, Robert said firmly. Real work that needs doing. He turned to Sarah. Your patients in Patterson's buildings need advocacy and healthcare coordination. My foundation has been trying to develop a community health program for affordable housing residents. We need someone who understands both nursing and housing issues. Sarah blinked in surprise. You want me to develop a health program? Yes, with full salary and benefits. Using your actual skills and experience? He turned to Michael. And you, Michael, your accounting background is exactly what we need for our tenant financial literacy program. Teaching budgeting, savings, credit repair. Michael seemed speechless. This isn't charity, Robert continued. This is me recognizing talent and passion that aligns with my foundation's goals. He leaned forward. You'd be helping people just like those who suffered under Patterson's management. Sarah felt a spark of excitement. I could actually help Mrs. Johnson and the others. Exactly. You'd be their advocate, coordinating with hospitals, clinics, and social services. The offer was tempting, but Sarah had another concern. What about the lawsuit against Patterson? If we work for you, won't that complicate things? Karen has considered that, Robert assured them. Your employment would begin after your testimony. Everything would be above board. Michael still looked troubled. And where would we live? We can't stay in this mansion forever. Robert smiled. The foundation owns several staff apartments near our main office. Nothing fancy, but comfortable and affordable. You'd pay fair rent and live independently. For the first time in days, Michael looked interested rather than uncomfortable. Could we see these apartments? He asked. Of course, today if you'd like. As Robert stepped away to make arrangements, Sarah and Michael had a moment alone. What do you think? Sarah asked quietly. It sounds better than running to Ohio, Michael admitted. actually using our skills to help others rather than just accepting handouts. But are we just trading one form of dependency for another? Would we ever have gotten these jobs without the eviction? Michael took her hand. Does that matter if we're doing meaningful work? If we're helping others like ourselves? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. It was Jenny from the hospital. Sarah, have you seen the news? Patterson's been arrested. What? Sarah quickly put the phone on speaker. It's all over the news. The police raided his office this morning. Something about financial fraud and safety violations. After hanging up, they rushed to find Robert, who was already watching the news in his office with Karen. On the screen, Mr. Patterson was being led away in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions. Did you do this? Sarah asked Robert. Not directly, he replied. We shared our evidence with the proper authorities. They moved faster than expected. Karen added, this changes the timeline for our case. We'll need your testimony sooner rather than later. Sarah and Michael exchanged looks. Everything was moving so quickly. The job offers, Patterson's arrest, the looming court case, it was overwhelming. We need time to think, Michael said finally, about the jobs, the apartment, all of it. Robert nodded. Take all the time you need. He looked directly at Sarah. But remember, sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if it's not where we planned. Sarah wondered if he was right. Was this all happening for a reason? Or were they simply being swept along by forces beyond their control? This is it, Robert said, using an electronic key card to open the door. One of our staff apartments. Sarah and Michael stepped into a bright, modern apartment with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. Though nowhere near as luxurious as the mansion, it was clean, newly renovated, and at least twice the size of their old place. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, Robert explained, leading them through. Full kitchen with new appliances. The building has a gym and community garden on the roof. Michael ran his hand along the kitchen counter. This is really nice. And the rent? Sarah asked cautiously. 30% of your salary, the standard for affordable housing, all utilities included. Michael opened the balcony door, stepping out to see the view. Where exactly are we? 4 blocks from the hospital where Sarah works, Robert replied, and our foundation offices are in the building across the street. Sarah joined Michael on the balcony. From here, she could see the hospital where she'd worked for 3 years. The familiarity was comforting. We'd be independent here, Michael said quietly. Paying our own way. Yes, Sarah agreed, but still connected to Robert. Inside, Robert waited patiently, giving them space to talk. When they returned, he had spread several blueprints across the dining table. While you consider my job offers, I wanted to show you something else, he said. The real master plan. The blueprints showed their old apartment building, but completely redesigned. You already bought it? Sarah asked in surprise. Patterson accepted our offer yesterday before his arrest, Robert confirmed. He was desperate for cash to pay his legal bills. So you own our old building now? Michael examined the blueprints closer. And the other 16? Robert nodded. But this one is special. It's going to be our showcase project. He pointed to the plans. We're gutting the entire building. New plumbing, electrical, heating, proper insulation, converting the 20 units into 30 smaller but more efficient apartments. For who? Sarah asked. Healthcare workers. Robert looked at her meaningfully. Nurses, medical assistants, home health aides, people who care for others, but often can't afford decent housing near the hospitals where they work. Sarah stared at him. You're creating housing specifically for healthcare workers. Yes, with your help. Robert turned to another page of the blueprint. This space on the ground floor? It's going to be a free health clinic for residents of all 17 buildings. And we need a director. Sarah's mouth fell open. Me? I'm just a floor nurse. I don't have management experience. You have compassion, clinical skills, and first-hand knowledge of the community's need, Robert countered. You can hire experienced administrators to handle the paperwork. Michael was studying financial projections attached to the blueprints. This is a major investment with minimal return, he noted. Business-wise, it doesn't make sense. Not everything is about profit, Robert replied. This is about transforming a community, creating a model that other cities can follow. He showed them more documents, letters from investors, pulling out of Patterson's other development projects, banks freezing his business accounts, partners distancing themselves. Patterson's empire is crumbling, Robert explained, and we're going to build something better from the ruins. Why us? Sarah finally asked the question that had been bothering her. Of all the people you could have chosen to help with this project, why us? Robert was quiet for a moment. When I was disguised as a homeless man, I observed hundreds of people. Most looked away. Some gave money to ease their conscience. A few offered food. But you, Sarah, you offered dignity. You looked me in the eye, asked my name, treated me like a human being. He turned to Michael. And you supported her choice, even when it cost you everything. That's rare and exactly the perspective we need for this project. Sarah and Michael exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. What about Patterson? Will he go to jail? Michael asked. Most likely, Robert nodded. But prison doesn't solve the systems that created him. We need to build alternatives. Sarah walked around the apartment once more, trying to picture their life here. Working for Robert's foundation, helping build a clinic. It was nothing like the future they'd planned, but somehow it felt right. We'll take the jobs, she said suddenly, surprising even herself, and the apartment. Michael looked at her with wide eyes, then slowly nodded. Yes, we will. Robert broke into a wide smile. Excellent. You can move in tomorrow. As they signed preliminary employment papers, Sarah had one more question. Robert, that first night when you were pretending to be homeless, what would you have done if I hadn't helped you? Robert's smile faded. I've done this in 12 cities, Sarah. You're the only person who invited me inside without hesitation. So if I hadn't, I would have continued my investigation of Patterson regardless, Robert said. But you and Michael would have remained in that building under his control. He looked at them both. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes everything for everyone involved. As they left the apartment, keys in hand, Sarah realized that helping a stranger in the rain had not just changed their lives, it might change an entire community. Are you sure about this? Michael asked as they parked outside their old apartment building. 1 week had passed since they'd accepted Robert's job offers and moved into the staff apartment. I need my nursing textbooks, Sarah replied, watching movers carry furniture out of the building. Robert said the renovation starts next week. It's now or never. Their old building looked different already. Construction dumpsters lined the street. Workers in hard hats measured windows and doorways. A large sign announced, Future Home of Westfield Housing for Healthcare Heroes. As they walked toward the entrance, a familiar figure appeared, Mrs. Finch, the nosy neighbor who had reported Sarah to Mr. Patterson. Well, look who's back, Mrs. Finch said, arms crossed over her flowered housecoat. Heard you're living in a mansion now. Too good for us regular folks? Sarah took a deep breath. Hello, Mrs. Finch. How are you? Being forced out, that's how I am, she snapped. Some rich man bought the building and now we all have to leave. You're not being forced out, Sarah explained. Robert Mr. Westfield is offering everyone temporary housing during renovations and first choice to return at the same rent. Mrs. Finch's angry expression faltered. Nobody told me that. There's a meeting about it tonight in the community center, Michael added. Everyone's getting help with moving costs, too. Mrs. Finch seemed confused. Why would he do that? Because not everyone is like Patterson, Sarah said simply. As they walked away, Michael squeezed Sarah's hand. That wasn't so bad. Just wait. There are 14 more neighbors who watched us get evicted and did nothing. Inside the building, they found their old apartment door open, a worker marking walls for demolition. With permission, they retrieved Sarah's medical books and a few mementos the eviction crew had missed. Doesn't look like much now, Michael noted, gazing around the small apartment that had been their first home together. It never was much, Sarah replied, but it was ours. As they carried boxes downstairs, they ran into Mr. Garcia from the fourth floor. "Sarah, Michael," he called out, looking embarrassed. "I've been hoping to see you. I wanted to apologize for not helping that night." "It's okay," Sarah said automatically. "No, it's not," Mr. Garcia insisted. "I was scared of Patterson. We all were. But that's no excuse for watching good people get thrown out like trash." Before Sarah could respond, two more neighbors appeared, both offering similar apologies. "News travels fast," Michael whispered. "Everyone knows we're working for Westfield now." "You think that's why they're apologizing?" Sarah asked quietly. "Does it matter? At least they recognize they were wrong." After loading the car, Sarah faced her next challenge, the hospital. She hadn't worked a shift since the news broke about her connection to billionaire Robert Westfield. Walking through the hospital entrance felt like her first day all over again. Conversations stopped when she passed. People stared or whispered behind her back. In the break room, she found Jenny and several other nurses huddled around a phone. "Sarah," Jenny looked up surprised. "We were just looking at the plans for the new clinic. Is it true you're going to be the director?" "Assistant director," Sarah corrected, setting down her lunch bag. "I'll be working with Dr. Menendez." Dr. Williams, the head nurse who had questioned Sarah's judgment just days before, approached with an outstretched hand. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I judged your actions without understanding the circumstances." Sarah accepted the handshake, though something about it felt hollow. "Thank you. And I hear congratulations are in order," Dr. Williams continued. "Director of a new clinic. We're all so proud." Sarah noticed several nurses nodding enthusiastically, the same ones who had gossiped about her reckless behavior. "Assistant director," Sarah corrected again. "And I hope some of you will consider applying to work there. We'll need good nurses." That afternoon, Sarah met Michael at Robert's foundation office. Unlike her awkward hospital reception, Michael was animated with excitement. "You should see the financial literacy curriculum we're developing," he exclaimed, showing her colorful workbooks. "Budget planning, saving strategies, first-time homebuyer workshops, all designed for people who've never had banking access." "You seem happy," Sarah observed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "I am. This is actually using my degree to help people, not just crunch numbers for some corporation." As they discussed their day, Robert invited them to join a meeting in the conference room. On the screen was a photograph of a much younger Robert with a woman who looked strikingly like him. "My sister Amy," Robert explained, "taken 20 years ago." "She looks just like you," Sarah remarked. "Yes, we were always close." Robert's voice softened. Before her struggles began. As the meeting continued, Sarah noticed something odd in the background of the Photo A building that looked familiar. "Is that—" she started. "Yes," Robert confirmed, his expression darkening. "That was Amy's apartment, her first home away from our parents. It was owned by a young landlord just starting his real estate career." He paused. "A man named James Patterson." Michael's eyes widened. "Our Patterson?"
"The very same," Robert said quietly, though neither of us knew the connection would come full circle like this. "Amy was my little sister," Robert said, his voice heavy with memory as he showed Sarah and Michael old photographs in his office. "Brilliant, kind, always helping others, much like you, Sarah." The three sat surrounded by case files on Patterson's properties. 2 weeks had passed since the revelation about Robert's connection to their former landlord. "What happened to her?" Michael asked cautiously. Robert sighed, touching a photo of a young woman with his same eyes and smile. 20 years ago, Amy was in nursing school, top of her class. She rented her first apartment from a young landlord named James Patterson. "Our Patterson," Sarah whispered. "Yes, he was just starting his real estate business, only owned 3 buildings then." Robert opened a folder containing yellowed newspaper clippings and official-looking documents. The building had serious problems: faulty wiring, water damage, mold. Amy kept requesting repairs. Patterson ignored her, just like he's ignored tenants for 20 years. Robert's hands tightened around the folder. One night, an electrical fire started in the walls. Amy got everyone out safely. She was always putting others first. But she ran back in for Mrs. Castillo, an elderly woman who couldn't walk well. Sarah felt a chill. What happened? They both made it out, but Amy inhaled too much smoke. Her lungs were severely damaged. Robert's voice cracked slightly. She spent 3 months in the hospital. The medical bills were enormous. Our parents had to sell their house to pay them. That's awful, Michael said quietly. The worst part? Patterson faced no consequences. The fire inspector found code violations throughout the building. But Patterson's lawyer argued Amy had modified an outlet in her apartment, making her responsible. That's ridiculous, Sarah exclaimed. It was a lie, Robert confirmed, but it worked. Insurance wouldn't pay. The lawsuit failed. What happened to Amy? Sarah asked gently. The lung damage was permanent. She couldn't continue nursing school. The medications were expensive. She fell into depression, then addiction to pain medication. Robert looked away. She's better now, 10 years sober, living in Colorado. But her dream of being a nurse was stolen. Michael looked puzzled. So you've been planning this revenge against Patterson for 20 years? Not revenge, Robert corrected. Justice. And not just for Amy, for everyone Patterson has hurt. Sarah studied Robert's face. But you never told Patterson who you really were, even when you were investigating his buildings? I wanted to see his true character without him knowing who I was. Robert smiled sadly. And then I met you, Sarah, a nurse with the same compassion Amy had. It felt like the universe was bringing things full circle. The door opened and Karen, Robert's lawyer, entered with a serious expression. Patterson wants to make a deal, she announced. His lawyer just called. He wants to meet. Robert's eyebrows raised. After refusing all communication for 2 weeks, what changed? Apparently, he just discovered who bought his buildings, Karen explained. Someone told him about your connection to Amy Miller. An hour later, they sat in a conference room at Karen's law office. The door opened, and James Patterson entered a shadow of his former arrogant self. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles underlined his bloodshot eyes. Mr. Westfield, Patterson said stiffly, I understand we have some history. 20 years of it, Robert replied coolly. Patterson glanced nervously at Sarah and Michael. I'm surprised to see my former tenants here. They're key witnesses in our case, Karen explained, and now employees of the Westfield Foundation. Patterson swallowed hard. I'd like to discuss a settlement, my lawyer suggests. I'm not interested in your lawyer's suggestions, Robert interrupted. You've spent 2 decades exploiting vulnerable people, just like you did with my sister. Patterson's face paled. Your sister? Amy Miller, the nursing student whose lungs you destroyed with your negligence, the woman whose medical career you ended. Recognition dawned in Patterson's eyes. Miller, I remember that case. The fire was... Don't you dare say it was her fault. Robert's voice turned to ice. We both know the truth. Patterson sank into a chair. I didn't know she was your sister. Would it have mattered? Sarah asked suddenly. Would you have treated her any differently if you'd known her brother would become a billionaire? Patterson had no answer. Robert leaned forward. Here's my offer. You will publicly admit your negligence in Amy's case and in your current properties. You will personally apologize to every tenant you've evicted illegally. And you will contribute 500 hours of community service to housing repair projects for low-income families. And if I refuse? Patterson asked weakly. Then we proceed with the criminal charges and civil suits, Karen replied. The evidence is overwhelming. You'd face significant prison time and financial ruin. Patterson looked around the room, his empire crumbling before his eyes. I need time to think.
As he left, Sarah turned to Robert. All these years, you've been working to prevent what happened to Amy from happening to others. Robert nodded. Everyone deserves safe, affordable housing, especially those who care for others like nurses. Sarah thought about the clinic they were building, the healthcare worker housing, the financial literacy programs. It wasn't revenge Robert wanted, it was transformation. "He's here," Karen announced, opening the conference room door 3 days later. Robert, Sarah, and Michael sat at the large table in the Westfield Foundation offices, surrounded by documents detailing Patterson's housing violations. The door opened, and Patterson entered, looking even more haggard than before. "I've considered your terms," he said without preamble, setting his briefcase on the table. "And?" Robert asked coolly. "I'll do it. The public admission, the apologies, the community service." Patterson's voice lacked its usual arrogance. "My lawyer says it's my best option." Robert's expression remained hard. "This isn't about legal strategy, Patterson. It's about acknowledging the damage you've done." "I understand," Patterson replied, though his eyes showed more fear than remorse. Karen opened a folder. "We've prepared a statement for you to review. It details specific violations at each property and acknowledges your responsibility." As Patterson read the statement, his face grew pale. "This is extensive." "It's accurate," Robert countered. "Every violation, every illegal eviction, every repair you ignored, including the one that changed my sister's life forever." Patterson looked up. "May I speak with you privately, Mr. Westfield?" Robert shook his head. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone." Patterson seemed to deflate. "Very well. I want to know, how is your sister now?" The question caught Robert off guard. "Why do you care?" "Because I've been thinking about her case since our last meeting. I remember her, the nursing student. I've been trying to convince myself all these years it wasn't my fault." "But it was," Robert said sharply. "Yes," Patterson admitted quietly. "It was." The simple admission hung in the air. Sarah watched Robert's face tighten with emotion. "She never became a nurse," Robert finally said. "She lost her health, her career, her dreams. She struggled for years with depression and addiction." Patterson closed his eyes briefly. "I'm truly sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix what you broke." "I know." Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "That's why I want to offer something else." He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a financial statement showing Patterson's personal assets, significantly more than they had anticipated. "My company is ruined, but I have personal investments that weren't touched by the criminal investigation," Patterson explained. "I want to create a scholarship fund for nursing students, in your sister's name." Robert stared at him in disbelief. "A scholarship fund? For students who face financial hardship or health challenges," Patterson continued. "Full tuition, living expenses, everything Amy lost." The room fell silent. Robert's jaw clenched as he processed the offer. "This doesn't erase what you did," he finally said. "Nothing can," Patterson agreed. "But maybe it means something else won't be broken in the future." Sarah, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Mr. Patterson, why this change of heart? Last time I saw you, you were throwing my wedding photos onto the sidewalk." Patterson looked directly at her. "Because I finally saw myself through other people's eyes. The evidence files, the tenant testimonies, the news reports, they all painted a picture of a monster. And I realized," his voice cracked, "they were right." For the first time, genuine emotion showed on Patterson's face. "I've spent 20 years telling myself I was just a businessman making rational decisions," he continued. "But seeing everything laid out, all the people I hurt, the lives I damaged, I can't hide from the truth anymore." Robert remained skeptical. "Words are easy, which is why I'm offering action," Patterson replied. "The scholarship fund is just the beginning. I want to work with your foundation, use my knowledge of real estate to help, not harm." Michael leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I know every substandard building in this city who owns them, what violations they're hiding, how they avoid inspections. I can help identify properties for your foundation to target next." Robert exchanged glances with Karen, who raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "And why should we trust you?" Robert asked. "You shouldn't," Patterson said simply. "Not yet. I need to earn that." Sarah had been watching Patterson carefully. As a nurse, she had developed a sense for genuine contrition versus manipulation. Something in Patterson's demeanor had fundamentally changed. "I think we should consider it," she said suddenly. Everyone turned to her in surprise. "Sarah," Robert questioned. "Not because he deserves forgiveness," she clarified, "but because his knowledge could help more people faster than we could do alone." "She's right," Karen acknowledged. "His insider information would be valuable." Robert studied Patterson with hard eyes. "If, and that's a big if, we were to accept your offer, you would work under strict supervision. One hint of deception, and the deal is off." "I understand," Patterson nodded. "And you'd still complete all community service hours, make all public apologies, and pay restitution to former tenants?"
"Yes."
Robert turned to Sarah. "You really believe he deserves a second chance?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I believe in the power of transformation, the same way you transformed our lives when we helped you." She looked directly at Patterson. "Sometimes people surprise you." Robert was silent for a long moment before saying, "I'll consider it, on one condition." "Anything," Patterson replied. "You need to meet Amy, face to face, and hear directly from her what your negligence cost." 3 months passed like a whirlwind. What had once been Patterson's rundown apartment building was now unrecognizable. "I can't believe it's the same place," Sarah whispered, standing in front of the renovated building on opening day. Where peeling paint and cracked concrete once greeted tenants, a welcoming facade of warm brick and large windows now stood. The dingy lobby had transformed into a bright community space with plants, comfortable seating, and a bulletin board already filled with neighborhood resources. Hope Housing read the new sign above the entrance, with smaller text. A Westfield Foundation community for healthcare heroes. Robert stood beside Sarah and Michael, surveying the transformation with pride. 17 weeks from purchase to completion, a new record for our foundation. "Only because you had round-the-clock crews working in shifts," Michael noted, checking his clipboard. "And it tripled the normal renovation budget. Some things are worth rushing and worth every penny," Robert replied. The transformation wasn't limited to the building. Sarah watched as James Patterson dressed in jeans and a work shirt instead of his usual expensive suit-directed movers, carrying furniture into the ground floor clinic space. 2 months ago, Patterson had flown to Colorado with Robert to meet Amy. The 4-hour conversation had changed something fundamental in the former landlord. When he returned, he had thrown himself into the renovation project with unexpected dedication. "Patterson is actually helping?" Jenny asked in disbelief, joining them outside. She would be starting as a nurse in the new clinic next week. 6 hours every day, Sarah confirmed. "Not just supervising, actually working. Yesterday he was on his knees installing floor tiles in the laundry room. After meeting my sister, he's been different," Robert admitted. "More human." Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. Every apartment had been completely gutted and rebuilt with quality materials. New plumbing, electrical systems, energy-efficient appliances, and properly functioning heating and cooling units replaced the failing infrastructure. "Mrs. Johnson," Sarah called, spotting her elderly patient being helped from a van. "Welcome home." The 78-year-old woman's face lit up. "Sarah, dear, is it really ready? My very own new apartment." "All ready," Sarah confirmed, taking her arm. "And right across from the clinic where I can keep an eye on you." Mrs. Johnson had been the first to sign a lease for the renovated building. As a former tenant and current patient of Sarah's, she represented exactly who the project aimed to help. "My breathing's been so much better since moving to that temporary apartment without all the mold," Mrs. Johnson said as they entered the lobby. "I can't wait to see my new place." Throughout the day, former and new tenants arrived, each greeted personally by Robert's team. Michael led financial literacy workshops in the community room, helping residents set up savings accounts and understand their leases, which were now written in plain language without hidden clauses. In the clinic space, Sarah supervised the installation of medical equipment donated by the hospital. Dr. Williams, who had once questioned Sarah's judgment, now eagerly toward the facility as a volunteer physician. We'll offer basic primary care, health screenings, medication management, and referrals, Sarah explained, showing her the exam rooms, all at no cost to building residents. This is extraordinary, Dr. Williams admitted. From floor nurse to clinic director in 3 months. I underestimated you, Sarah. By afternoon, most residents had moved in, and the community room filled for an official ribbon-cutting ceremony. Robert stood before the crowd, looking more comfortable in this setting than he ever had in his mansion. Today marks not just the opening of a building, he began, but the beginning of a new approach to housing in our city. He explained the Hope housing model: affordable rents fixed at 30% of income, on-site health care, financial education, and community support. But I'm not the one who made this happen, Robert continued, gesturing to Sarah and Michael. These two extraordinary people showed me what true compassion looks like. When they had every reason to focus on their own crisis, they instead thought about their community. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears as the room erupted in applause. 3 months ago, she'd been sobbing on the sidewalk as her belongings were thrown onto the street. Now she stood at the center of something revolutionary. As Robert finished his speech, a surprising figure approached the microphone. James Patterson. A hush fell over the room. Many residents recognized their former landlord, and whispers spread quickly. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Patterson began, his voice lacking its former arrogance. For years I put profit above people. I viewed you as sources of income, not as human beings with rights and dignity. He paused, visibly emotional. I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can dedicate myself to repairing what I've broken, not just buildings, but trust. From the back of the room, Mrs. Johnson called out, Actions speak louder than words, Mr. Patterson. Patterson nodded. You're absolutely right. That's why I've signed a legal agreement to work on Westfield Foundation housing projects for the next 5 years, without compensation. As the ceremony concluded and residents explored their new homes, Sarah found herself standing in the clinic that would officially open next week. Through the window, she could see the street where she'd once helped a homeless man during a rainstorm. Ready for this new chapter? Michael asked, joining her. Sarah smiled. More than ready. She's here, Michael whispered, nudging Sarah as they stood in the Hope Housing lobby 1 month after the grand opening. Sarah looked up to see a woman with Robert's eyes and smile entering through the front doors. Though her walk had a slight limp and she appeared older than her 45 years, Amy Westfield carried herself with quiet dignity. Welcome to Hope Housing, Sarah greeted her, extending her hand. I'm Sarah Miller. The nurse who started all this, Amy said warmly, taking Sarah's hand in both of hers. My brother has told me so much about you. Robert emerged from the clinic, his face lighting up at the sight of his sister. Amy, you made it! Their embrace spoke volumes about their bond forged through hardship and healing. When they separated, Robert kept his arm around her shoulders. How was your flight from Colorado? He asked. Fine, though I'm still getting used to traveling again, Amy replied. She looked around the bright lobby. This place is incredible, Rob. Exactly what we talked about all those years ago. Sarah noticed Amy's gaze drift toward the clinic entrance, where the nameplate read, the Amy Westfield Community Health Clinic. Her eyes welled with tears. You actually did it, she whispered to her brother. We did it, Robert corrected. Your story inspired all of this. The touching moment was interrupted by the sound of a door closing firmly. James Patterson stood frozen at the building entrance, a box of medical supplies in his arms. His face had gone pale at the sight of Amy. Mr. Patterson, Robert said formally, you remember my sister. The room's atmosphere instantly changed. Though Patterson had been working diligently on the project for months, this was the first time he and Amy had been in the same building since their meeting in Colorado. Patterson set down the box carefully. Hello, Amy. James, she acknowledged with a slight nod. The tension was palpable as tenants and staff watched the interaction. Everyone knew the story now, how Patterson's negligence had altered Amy's life path 20 years ago. I was just giving Amy a tour, Robert said, his voice tight. Perhaps you'd like to join us? Patterson looked like he wanted to run, but he straightened his shoulders. If Amy is comfortable with that, all eyes turned to Amy, who studied Patterson's face carefully. I think that would be appropriate. As they walked through the building, Patterson explained the renovations in each area. His technical knowledge was impressive, and Sarah noticed how thoroughly he understood the building's systems now, a stark contrast to his previous negligence. In the community room, several residents were gathered for one of Michael's financial workshops. When they spotted Patterson, whispers spread quickly. Mrs. Johnson stood up. Is that her? The nurse whose life you ruined? Patterson flinched visibly. Yes, I'm Amy, she answered directly. Though ruined isn't a word I'd use. But he's the reason you couldn't become a nurse, right? Another resident asked. Amy looked thoughtfully at Patterson. His negligence changed my path, yes. The tension in the room grew as more residents joined the impromptu confrontation. Despite his months of visible redemption work, many still harbored anger toward Patterson. Why is he even here, someone called out, after what he did to all of us? Robert stepped forward. James has been an essential part of this project. His knowledge has... It's okay, Robert, Patterson interrupted. He faced the room full of former tenants. You have every right to question my presence here. The room fell silent as Patterson continued. 20 years ago, I made decisions that changed Amy's life forever. And for the past 2 decades, I've continued making those same selfish choices, hurting hundreds of tenants. His voice was steady but humble. I can't undo that damage, but I can try to create something better going forward. Amy surprised everyone by speaking next. When James and I met in Colorado, I expected to hate him. I had every right to. She looked around at the residents. Just as you all do. She walked to the window overlooking the clinic that bore her name. But hatred doesn't build anything new. Look what we've created instead. Mrs. Johnson wasn't satisfied. Easy to forgive when you're rich now. What about those of us who suffered for years? You're absolutely right, Amy acknowledged, which is why James and I have been working on something else. She nodded to Patterson. Patterson opened his tablet and displayed a document on the large screen. This is the Tenant Justice Fund. Every dollar of profit I ever made from substandard housing is being placed in this fund, approximately $8 million. Gasps filled the room. The fund will provide compensation to every tenant who lived in my buildings over the past 20 years, Patterson explained, and ongoing support for healthcare costs related to housing conditions. Sarah watched the faces of the residents transform from skepticism to cautious hope. I don't expect forgiveness, Patterson concluded, but I am committed to making practical amends. Amy stepped forward and did something no one expected. She extended her hand to Patterson. 20 years ago, we were both young people making choices that would define our lives, she said as he hesitantly took her hand. Your choices were wrong, but this choice right here, this one is right. 1 year later, Sarah stood on the rooftop garden of Hope Housing, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The garden, once just a dream on blueprint paper, now flourished with vegetables, herbs, and flowers, tended by residents who had formed a tight-knit community. There you are, Michael said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. Everyone's looking for you downstairs. Just needed a moment, Sarah replied, accepting the coffee. It's a lot to take in. Below them, a crowd had gathered for the 1-year anniversary celebration of Hope Housing. What had started as a single renovated apartment building had expanded to 5 properties across the city. The Amy Westfield Clinic now served over 3,000 patients, with satellite locations opening in 2 other neighborhoods. Can you believe it's been a year? Michael asked, his arm slipping around her waist. Sarah shook her head. Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were watching our stuff being thrown onto the sidewalk. And sometimes it feels like another lifetime, he added. The rooftop door opened and Robert appeared. The guests of honor are missing, he said with a smile. We can't start the ceremony without you 2. Sarah took a deep breath. Just needed to center myself. Understandable, Robert nodded. It's not every day you win the Urban Housing Innovation Award. The prestigious award had come as a shock, Sarah and Michael's collaborative model for integrating healthcare, housing, and financial education had drawn national attention. Their approach was now being studied by cities across the country. "How's Amy doing with the crowd?" Sarah asked as they made their way downstairs. "Thriving," Robert replied proudly. "She's speaking with the nursing students who received the first scholarships." The Amy Westfield Nursing Scholarship now supported 10 students annually, all from underprivileged backgrounds or facing personal challenges. Amy herself had become a mentor to these students, finding purpose in guiding others toward the dream she once lost. As they entered the community room, applause erupted. Residents, healthcare workers, city officials, and media representatives filled the space. At the center stood a large model displaying the next phase of Hope Housing, a campus-style development with affordable apartments, healthcare facilities, childcare, and job training all in one location. Sarah spotted Patterson near the model, explaining features to a group of city planners. The past year had transformed him physically and mentally. Gone was the arrogant slumlord. In his place stood a man dedicated to housing justice. While some would never fully trust him, his consistent actions had earned grudging respect. "Sarah," Mrs. Johnson called, waving from her seat in the front row. The elderly woman's health had improved dramatically once she moved into a mold-free environment. "I saved you a seat, dear." Before Sarah could join her, Jenny appeared with a television reporter. "Sarah, they want a quick interview before the ceremony." "The nurse who started it all?" the reporter began once the camera was rolling. "Did you ever imagine your simple act of kindness would lead to all this?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "A year ago, I just did what felt right, helping someone who needed shelter during a storm. I lost my home because of it, but I found something much bigger, a community and a purpose." After the interview, Robert called everyone to attention for the ceremony. As he spoke about the project's success and future plans, Sarah found herself watching the faces in the crowd, former homeless individuals now employed as maintenance staff, elderly residents whose health had improved, nursing students inspired by Amy's story. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stepped to the microphone and saw a familiar face slip in at the back of the room. The security guard from Robert's mansion who had first brought them the key that changed everything. "1 year ago, I was standing in the rain, watching everything I owned being thrown onto the sidewalk," Sarah began, "all because I offered shelter to someone who appeared to have nothing to give in return." She looked directly at Robert. "But appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the person who seems to need help is actually the one with the most to give. And sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding something better." As the ceremony concluded and guests mingled, Amy approached Sarah with a young woman in scrubs. "Sarah, this is Lucia, one of our scholarship recipients," Amy said. "She's been inspired by your story." "I was homeless for 8 months last year," Lucia explained quietly. "A nurse at the free clinic always saved sandwiches for me. She made me feel human when everyone else looked away." Sarah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "That kindness kept you going?" "It saved me," Lucia confirmed, "just like you saved Robert that night." Later, as the celebration wound down, Sarah, Michael, Robert, and Amy found themselves alone in the clinic named after the nurse who never was, but whose story had inspired everything around them. "Full circle," Robert observed, looking out at the building that had once been a place of suffering, but was now a beacon of hope. Sarah thought about the rainy night 1 year ago when she'd invited a homeless man inside. Sometimes the smallest kindness creates the biggest ripples. "And sometime," Michael added, taking her hand, "those ripples become waves that change everything."